Hello and welcome to Shed the Debt. I'm Pattie Lovett-Reid. I have a special guest with us today, Dr. Marla Shapiro. She is the medical expert for CTV. She also provides great insight to Canadians on all things medical. And we're going to talk a little bit about everything that's going on from an economic perspective and the impact that it has on your health. Marla, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Patty. This is one of those times where really we recognize that, the silos that we put in terms of health and economics, they interface very much, and particularly with what's going on now, you really see that interface in sort of bold font.
In both, so when you obviously, and I didn't mention it, have a thriving large medical practice. Are people coming to you saying just how stressed they are?
In every visit that I've had, it comes up. And everybody has a, underlying stress about a number of things that's going on in their life, but uniformly, several times a day, the uncertainty of what's happening in our own country, across the border, around the world. This is just maxed out, and everybody is bringing it up. How do I cope with this? I feel so anxious. I feel so nervous, and I'm hearing this multiple times a day. And not only am I hearing it from the group that you would typically expect to hear it from, like middle and older individuals who often may be thinking about fixed incomes or how they're living their lives right now, but even younger adults are feeling quite anxious about what this means for opportunity, future opportunities,
Yeah.
job stability, the mortgage rates. Like that's your end of the world, but all of a sudden it's in my end of the world.
Yeah, so what can be a medical crisis in some cases, if I think back to COVID, became a financial crisis.
Yeah.
It's almost reversed this time. For some, there's a very serious financial crisis that can spiral into a medical crisis fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Marla,
100%.
what are some of the what are some of the, not necessarily the signs when I to think about anxiety and feeling anxious and maybe not sleeping, but are there things or ways that this also impacts us that we don't even see?
So most people don't recognize with that element of chronic stress, our cortisol levels spike,
Hmm.
and that in turn feeds into our anxiety levels, our sleep disturbances, getting up in the middle of the night and ruminating about what's happening. And we know that people who have higher stress levels and greater sleep disturbances tie into higher risks of underlying illness. So cardiovascular. And even if you don't have a cardiovascular issue, you can be at higher risk of having a cardiovascular event, that type of stress. And overall, when you're that stressed, you lose your resilience and your capacity to deal with added challenges. So instead of becoming, let me think this through, let me be a problem solver, we become very reactive. So people tell me that they're, quick to anger, they have no patience, they're hard to get along with. It takes very little to get them feeling, that much more out of control. Like it's like sitting in a car with your hand on that wheel and it's just, pushing that honking horn every 5 minutes or so for something minor to something not so minor.
So this builds up over time, and if you don't realize it, how do you what do you say to people when they come to you?
So,
Turn off the news. I bet you tell us to turn off the news.
well, what I tell them is that we know that when us as individuals and then as a community, because it's almost like an infectious disease, this element of anxiety. Obviously, it's not infectious in the classic sense, the way RSV is and the flu is, but your anxiety often will bleed into somebody else's. So we see increased rates of depression and anxiety disorders. We see higher rates of substance abuse. We see a higher strain on the healthcare system and mental health services, which is already impossible for me to get for my patients. And as a community, we begin to decline. So one of the first things that I point out is that you want to try and focus a little bit in terms of what has you stressed the most, and then ask yourself the question, what can I control about this?
Right.
So you can't control whether there are tariffs or aren't tariffs. It's impossible to follow the bouncing ball. And if there are tariffs, what does that mean to you if you're in an industry or if you're not in that industry? How will prices and the cost of living go up? These are things right now that we as individuals cannot control. But what you can control, and what I point out to my patients, is you can control what you do with your stress. So the first thing is to acknowledge your anxiety and acknowledge your stress, and then give yourself permission to say, I'm going to put this aside because it's not helping me problem solve. It's not helping me take care of myself or build up any of my wellness and my wellness reserve or be able to think about what I can do to be resilient. I need to think about, in times of uncertainty, what can I control? And we know tomorrow's the 5th-year anniversary of COVID, which I can hardly believe that it's 5 years. But think back to how that was, where we had no information and we felt completely out of control and our lives felt threatened from a health point of view with death and illness. This is completely different. But that type of loss of control is somewhat similar. And the loss of information that often will give you, the pillars to which you can make your decisions.
Marla, do you ever encourage people once they've come to you to say, reach out for help sooner? Or what could you do differently next time?
So, what I say is the first and most important thing is identify the what of the what you need help with. So, I'm not you, but I will say to patients, if you're feeling out of control from a financial point of view, get a good financial plan. Get some good advice for someone who can look at your situation and help you figure out, where do you pull in, where do you rein in, how do you change if you're investing, or how do you change the way that you're living? Like, what is my financial plan under times of uncertainty where I'm worried about the financial implications of how I'm going to live my life? So getting good solid advice is really important. And while community support is important and emotional support and help in numbers with other people who are feeling the same, often having sort of a finite plan of what I can do, the ABCs of these steps, can make you feel like you're taking back an element of control and make you feel a little bit calmer, as opposed to really feeling like I don't know what to do and I'm so overwhelmed that I can't possibly make a good decision.
So, your last piece of advice to someone who's watching this right now may not even realize how anxious they've become
Right.
given the
Yeah.
economic landscape. It's control the one thing that you can do. And that may be getting going to an advisor or
Yeah,
getting a
and
plan.
and when we talk about advisory, we talk about mental health advisors as well. So
Yes.
the first thing is try and identify where you're feeling most anxiety. Are there specific things that are triggering this anxiety? Can you seek social support within your own community or your religious community, your cultural community? Can you make an effort to prioritize your mental health care where you say, I'm going to go for a 20-minute walk, or I'm going to do something physical to invest in my health? Because we know that people who are physically active from a mental health care point of view do better as well. Are there stress reduction techniques that you can do? And as much as you and I want people to watch the news because that's what we do, there's got to be a limit as to how much news you watch, because you cannot become obsessed with every single moment of every single day watching that news, because all that it does is fuel more anxiety and more uncertainty. So put parameters on this in terms of, how much am I going to read? When am I going to say it's enough? When am I going to walk away from this and invest in doing something that's positive for me?
So, at the end of the day, Marla, it's controlling what you can control in an environment that feels completely out of control.
I think at the end of the day, what you want to do is take back the control in the areas that you can take back control. And, look, Patty, I think of you as a friend. I think of you as a colleague. And many times when I think about, okay, what support do I need? It may center around the fact that, oh, I need some good financial support from somebody who understands my life, understands my goals, understands what it is I'm trying to attain. How may I take a step back when times are uncertain? How do I have that protect me fund, or how do I change my lifestyle? Sometimes having those very clear ABCs of what you do, if that's fueling your anxiety, like this is called shed the debt. Well, to me, shed the debt not only financially, shed the debt emotionally, shed the debt from anger and reactivity. Try and recognize, what is it that I can control so that anxiety doesn't filter into everything and I make rash and irrational and decisions that in the long run aren't going to be good for me.
Wow, Marla, you are a friend. Thank you so much for being here today. This was Dr. Marla Shapiro, a medical expert, CTV's medical expert, and someone, basically, we call you Dr. Marla. You're Canada's doctor.
Thanks, Patty, for having me.
Thanks.